In the mid-1980s, television was still ruled by youth. Networks craved pretty faces, young love stories, and family-friendly laughs. Sitcoms were about suburban families, quirky neighbors, or handsome bachelors searching for romance. The formula was safe, predictable, and, most importantly, profitable. No one in Hollywood believed an audience would tune in week after week to watch four women over 50 talk about growing old in Miami. The idea sounded like ratings poison, and yet in 1985, NBC decided to gamble. A pilot script for what would become The Golden Girls crossed the desks of executives, and it was unlike anything they had seen before. No housewives struggling with kids. No teenage drama. No perfect nuclear family. Instead, it featured four women living together, widowed, divorced, and single, cracking jokes about sex, aging, and the realities of life that most sitcoms didn't dare mention. Initially, NBC didn't want to touch it. Advertisers were skeptical. Who would want to watch older women talk about menopause and dating? But then came the table read. Bea Arthur, Betty White, Rue McClanahan, and Estelle Getty walked into the room, and the moment they began delivering lines, the air changed. The jokes landed with razor-sharp precision, and the chemistry was undeniable. The executives who had doubted the project suddenly realized they weren't just listening to another sitcom, they were witnessing lightning in a bottle. NBUT, make no mistake. The Golden Girls wasn't just an artistic risk. It was a cultural rebellion. By putting older women at the center of a primetime show, NBC was quietly shattering Hollywood's most stubborn stereotype that a woman's career, beauty, and relevance expired by 40. These characters were vibrant, witty, and unapologetically alive, and for viewers who had been told that aging was something to hide, the show became a lifeline. And still, behind this bold decision, there was deep fear. NBC knew one wrong move could tank the series before it even began. That's why casting was such a delicate dance. The producers originally wanted Betty White to play Blanche, the Southern Belle, with an insatiable appetite for romance. But White had already played a similar role on The Mary Tyler Moore Show. Swapping roles with Rue McClanahan gave the show its spark. Estelle Getty, a relatively unknown stage actress, was the last to be cast. But her fiery audition as Sophia, the sharp-tongued mother, stunned everyone. Suddenly, the puzzle was complete, and then, when the pilot aired, something extraordinary happened. Ratings soared. Millions of viewers, many of them younger than NBC had predicted, tuned in to see four women who weren't just surviving an old age. They were thriving, bickering, laughing, and still living life to the fullest. The gamble had paid off, and it paid off big. In BUT, that success masked the storm already brewing. What audiences didn't know then was that the same energy that made the show feel so electric on screen was also fueling tension behind the scenes. Rivalries were born, egos clashed, and private struggles began to bleed into the work. While America laughed at Blanche's jokes, Dorothy's sarcasm, Rose's innocence, and Sophia's savage one-liners, the actresses themselves were carrying secrets, pain, and conflict that would shape the show's legacy in ways no one expected. NTHE gamble had worked, but it also set the stage for scandals, battles, and a truth that would only come to light decades later, that The Golden Girls was never the sweet, simple comedy it appeared to be. It was messy, controversial, and daring from the very start. On screen, The Golden Girls was a flawless symphony. The timing, the chemistry, the way every punchline seemed to fall like a perfectly aimed dart. It all looked effortless. But behind the camera, the shine wasn't nearly as smooth. The four women who made the world laugh were also four very different personalities, and those differences often erupted into silent battles, cold stares, and whispers of tension that the audience never saw. NTHE's biggest divide lay between two of the show's most beloved stars, Bea Arthur and Betty White. To millions of fans, they were Dorothy and Rose, the sharp-tongued realist and the sweet but clueless optimist. Their dynamic on screen was iconic, but off-screen, the contrast wasn't played for laughs. Arthur, a Broadway veteran with a commanding stage presence, worked with intensity and seriousness. She believed in rehearsal, discipline, and a sharp focus on the craft. Betty White, on the other hand, had built her career on charm and spontaneity. She was warm, approachable, always quick with a joke between takes. It sounds harmless, but to be Arthur, Betty's sunny personality often felt like a disruption, a way of breaking the rhythm she worked so hard to perfect. Crew members recalled that Arthur could be openly annoyed when White laughed too much during filming or when she seemed too casual about preparation. Their differences weren't explosive. No screaming matches, no public meltdowns, but they lingered like smoke in a closed room. Cast and crew learned quickly. You didn't mention Betty White's Emmy wins around B. Arthur if you wanted a peaceful day on set. While that rivalry simmered, another challenge threatened the heart of the show: Estelle Getty. At 62, she was the youngest of the four actresses, yet she played the oldest character, Sophia, Dorothy's wisecracking mother. Audiences adored her, but what they didn't know was how much Getty struggled behind the scenes. Unlike her castmates, Getty had little television experience. She was a stage actress, nervous around cameras, and suffered from paralyzing stage fright. Before live tapings, she would sometimes freeze, forgetting her lines or trembling as the pressure of millions watching bore down on her. Now, as the seasons went on, a cruel irony emerged. Getty, who played the sharpest and quickest character on screen, began to battle memory loss in real life. Lines became harder to remember, and she leaned on cue cards or repeated rehearsals to get through scenes. Her co-stars often shielded her from embarrassment, but privately, the crew whispered about her decline. For viewers, Sophia remained the fearless truth-teller, but behind the glitter, Getty was quietly fighting to hold herself together. Nrue McClanahan, meanwhile, navigated her own private turmoil while slipping seamlessly into Blanche's high heels. Bold, flirty, and unapologetically sexual, Blanche was the show's most daring creation, but the confidence viewers adored was often the opposite of Rue's reality. Off-screen, she was recovering from heartbreak, divorce, and personal struggles that she masked with humor. Her pain gave Blanche depth. What could have been a shallow caricature of a man-hungry Southern belle became a layered character because Rue poured her own vulnerability into every line. Together, these four women carried the show, even as their personal differences gnawed at the seams. Tensions were never loud enough to derail production, but they created an undercurrent that colored every rehearsal and every taping. To the outside world, The Golden Girls was a perfect comedy machine. Inside, it was a fragile balancing act. Four women bound by success, yet separated by clashing egos, fragile health, and hidden pain. And it was television magic, yes. But magic always comes with misdirection. What the audience laughed at on Friday nights was only half the story. If Blanche Devereaux was the heartbeat of The Golden Girls, then Rue McClanahan was the one who kept that pulse alive. On screen, Blanche was larger than life, a sultry Southern belle who embraced romance, flirtation, and sex with an audacity that shocked television audiences in the 1980s. She was fearless, unapologetic, and delightfully outrageous. But for Rue, playing Blanche wasn't just a role, it was a mask. Behind the fiery confidence, she carried a lifetime of heartbreak, and much of Blanche's boldness was born from Rue's own pain. NBY, the time The Golden Girls premiered, Rue had lived through 3 divorces and was on the cusp of more heartbreaks yet to come. Her personal life was a whirlwind of marriages, betrayals, and disappointments. She later admitted that each of those relationships left scars, shaping not only who she was as a woman, but also the way she approached Blanche. While viewers laughed at Blanche's endless romantic escapades, Rue was channeling her own history of failed marriages and unsteady love, weaving her wounds into Blanche's lines. NHER co-stars often marveled at how natural she was in the role, but the truth was that Rue's natural charm came from lived experience. Every time Blanche boasted about a new suitor or strutted with exaggerated confidence, there was an undertone, a quiet reminder that confidence is sometimes born from survival. Rue knew what it meant to be broken, and she knew what it meant to rebuild herself. And yet, the industry wasn't kind to her. Hollywood has always been brutal to women, but for an actress in her 50s, the cruelty was magnified. Roles for women her age were scarce, and the ones that did exist were often written as background figures: mothers, grandmothers, or nags. Rue wanted more. She wanted characters with fire, women who still lived boldly, even after society tried to erase them. Blanche gave her that outlet. She often described playing Blanche as liberating, as though all the years of being dismissed in Hollywood were finally vindicated by a role that demanded center stage. NBUT's success came at a cost. Rue's personal life remained stormy. During the height of the show, she juggled her fame with rocky relationships and the constant pressure of living up to Blanche's reputation. Fans expected her to be Blanche in real life. Glamorous, flirty, and always ready with a wicked smile. Rue was warm and witty, but she wasn't Blanche. Sometimes the weight of that expectation was exhausting, and those close to her recalled how she often retreated from the public eye when the lines between character and reality blurred too much. Yet, despite the turmoil, Rue refused to let her pain define her. Instead, she transformed it into art. She gave Blanche layers: vulnerability hidden beneath bravado, loneliness masked by endless dates, strength disguised as flirtation. That's why Blanche wasn't just comic relief, she was real. Women across the world, whether they admitted it or not, saw themselves in her. They saw the heartbreak, the resilience, and the refusal to surrender to age or circumstance. Nrue McClanahan's performance wasn't just acting, it was confession. Every laugh Blanche earned came with a shadow of Rue's own story, and that's why Blanche Devereaux endures. She wasn't simply a character crafted by a team of writers. She was a woman who lived inside Rue, shaped by her broken heart, her resilience, and her refusal to fade away quietly. NTHE audience thought they were laughing at Blanche's antics. In reality, they were witnessing Rue McClanahan bare her soul, one sassy, heartbreaking punchline at a time. Comedy is often the sweetest disguise for pain. It softens the blow, makes difficult truths easier to swallow, and lets an audience laugh at the very things they might otherwise cry about. The Golden Girls understood this better than most shows of its time. But what made it revolutionary in the 1980s is also what makes it controversial today. Beneath the quick one-liners and laugh tracks were storylines that cut into subjects television rarely touched: racism, addiction, homosexuality, ageism, and death. In a decade obsessed with glamour and escapism, these topics weren't supposed to make it into a half-hour sitcom about 4 women living together in Miami, yet the Golden Girls made them unavoidable. When Dorothy's son married an older woman, the show raised questions about age and relationships. When Blanche's brother came out as gay, it challenged one of the strongest taboos of the era, and did so with dignity and humor. When Sophia dealt with the realities of nursing homes, it exposed a truth many families tried to hide. These weren't just jokes. They were social commentary wrapped in laughter. And audiences at the time adored it. Millions tuned in every week, finding comfort in the way the show balanced humor with humanity. But as decades passed, society changed, and so did the lens through which we view television. By the 2020s, cancel culture had reshaped the entertainment landscape, resurrecting old clips and dissecting them under a microscope. Lines that once drew laughter were suddenly re-examined as offensive or insensitive. And take, for example, Rose's naivete. Her character was beloved, but her small-town innocence often became the setup for jokes that leaned on stereotypes or casual cruelty. Or Blanche's endless sexual innuendos, groundbreaking in their day, but criticized later as perpetuating harmful tropes about women's worth being tied to desirability. Even Sophia's sharp insults, while hilarious, sometimes crossed lines that modern viewers found troubling. What had once been seen as playful banter now sparked debates about taste, sensitivity, and intent. NTHE controversy deepened when clips resurfaced online in which the characters joked about issues like immigration, race, or health in ways that felt jarring to a new generation. Social media erupted, with fans split down the middle. Some defended the show, arguing it should be viewed in the context of its time, a trailblazer that dared to even mention subjects no other sitcom would touch. Others insisted that laughter doesn't excuse harm, and that even progressive shows could reinforce damaging stereotypes. NBUT, here's the scandalous truth. Those very moments of discomfort are part of what made The Golden Girls unforgettable. Unlike many sitcoms, it didn't avoid tension, it leaned into it. The jokes weren't just jokes, they were a mirror. And sometimes mirrors show us things we'd rather not see. NFOR the actresses, tackling those storylines was equally risky. Betty White once admitted that she worried certain episodes might alienate audiences, especially in conservative households. B. Arthur, however, relished the chance to play Dorothy as a voice of reason, the character who often challenged ignorance head-on. The clash between daring scripts and cultural boundaries was constant, yet it created television that still sparks conversation nearly 40 years later. And perhaps that's the irony. What was once seen as bold, even radical, is now scrutinized as problematic. But in the process, the show has remained relevant. Long after its final episode, people are still arguing, debating, and yes, laughing. Because sometimes comedy isn't just about making you laugh. Sometimes it's about making you uncomfortable and forcing you to question why. For decades, The Golden Girls lived in reruns as a polished, almost perfect artifact of television history. Every joke felt rehearsed, every storyline neatly wrapped. But in 2024, a ripple shook the fandom when a piece of footage emerged online, a scene that NBC had ordered cut from the show's original run, a scene insiders whispered about for years. It carried a label scrawled on the production notes: "Do not air this." NTHE leaked footage wasn't a half-finished blooper reel or a funny outtake. It was darker, sharper, and far riskier than anything that ever made it to broadcast. In it, the four women sat at the kitchen table, as they so often did. But instead of their usual playful banter, the conversation spiraled into raw, uncomfortable territory. Issues of race, sexuality, and ageism handled with a bluntness that even 1980s network executives couldn't stomach. The laughter was there, but the edge was too sharp. It wasn't sitcom humor anymore. It was social commentary that cut to the bone. When the footage leaked, fans were stunned. Some praised it as proof of the show's bravery, evidence that the writers were pushing even harder against cultural taboos than anyone realized. Others were unsettled, insisting the tone crossed the line into something that felt more bitter than funny. For the first time, audiences were confronted with a version of the Golden Girls that wasn't safe, wasn't polished, and wasn't designed for mass appeal. NWHY, was it cut? The answer lies in the television landscape of the 1980s. NBC was bold in greenlighting a sitcom about older women, but even boldness had its limits. Advertisers held the power, and they weren't willing to risk millions on a show that openly ridiculed social norms in such a raw way. Network censors flagged the episode, executives panicked, and the directive came down swiftly. Shelve it, bury it, pretend it never existed. NBUT, of course. Nothing in Hollywood stays buried forever. For years, whispers circulated among crew members about the banned scene. Writers hinted at it in interviews, describing moments they fought to keep but were forced to cut. The actresses themselves remained mostly silent, though Rue McClanahan once hinted that some of their best work never saw the light of day. NTHE 2024 leak finally cracked the myth open. Suddenly, fans were watching The Golden Girls not as a comforting sitcom, but as the radical, boundary-shattering project it could have been if the censors hadn't interfered. It wasn't just nostalgia anymore, it was revelation. NTHE impact was immediate. Social media exploded with debates. Some viewers demanded the footage be officially released, arguing that history deserved to see the show in its unfiltered form. Others feared it would tarnish the show's legacy, transforming a beloved comedy into something more controversial, even divisive. Petitions circulated online, think pieces filled cultural pages, and suddenly, The Golden Girls was back in the headlines nearly 4 decades after its debut. NBUT. Perhaps the most haunting part of the leak wasn't the content itself, it was what it revealed about television as a whole. How many other shows had moments erased, censored, or buried because executives deemed them too much? How much of our cultural memory has been sanitized, softened, and hidden away in vaults, waiting to be leaked decades later? NTHE Golden Girls had always been daring, but the lost footage proved it had the potential to be even more radical than history allowed it to be. And that raises a chilling question. What if the version we grew up with wasn't the full truth, but only the version NBC thought we could handle? NTHE scene was labeled, "Do not air this." But in 2024, the world finally did. When The Golden Girls first premiered in 1985, no one expected it to last. A sitcom about 4 women in their 50s and 60s? In the youth-obsessed culture of Hollywood, it sounded like a punchline. And yet, the show not only lasted, it thrived. 7 seasons, nearly 200 episodes, and countless awards later, it had transformed from a risky experiment into one of the most celebrated sitcoms in television history. But its legacy was never just about laughs. It was about redefining what television could say about women, about friendship, and about life itself. NTHE characters of Dorothy, Blanche, Rose, and Sophia weren't caricatures. They were complex women with flaws, fears, and dreams, who just happened to be older. That alone made the show revolutionary. For millions of viewers, The Golden Girls was the first time they saw women past 40 treated as vibrant leads instead of background players. The series gave aging a new face, witty, bold, sometimes vulnerable, but never irrelevant, and the bond between the four women became its own cultural symbol. In a world where most narratives revolved around romantic love, The Golden Girls dared to suggest that friendship could be the most enduring love story of all. They laughed together, fought together, and supported each other through death, heartbreak, and disappointment. For fans, it wasn't just comedy. It was a promise that life could still be rich and meaningful, even after society told you it was over. NBUT, the show's legacy is complicated. As decades passed, it became both a nostalgic comfort and a lightning rod for controversy. The same daring jokes that once made it revolutionary now make it divisive in the age of cancel culture. Some see it as progressive for its time. Others argue it reinforced stereotypes under the guise of comedy, yet maybe that tension is part of why it endures. The Golden Girls was never meant to be safe. It was meant to provoke, to push, to laugh at the unspoken truths most people were too afraid to confront. NTHE leaked footage in 2024 only added to that mythology. Suddenly, the show wasn't just remembered as a witty, groundbreaking sitcom. It was seen as a censored masterpiece, restrained by the limits of its era. That revelation reshaped the way fans and critics alike looked at the series. It wasn't just comfort TV, it was subversive, daring, and sometimes too bold even for prime time. Even the behind-the-scenes tensions between the actresses have become part of its legend. The rivalry between Bea Arthur and Betty White, Estelle Getty's private struggles with memory loss, Rue McClanahan's heartbreaks, these real-life dramas only deepen the mystique of the show. It was proof that what audiences saw on screen was magic born out of chaos, a reminder that even the brightest stars carry shadows. Today, nearly 4 decades later, The Golden Girls continues to resonate with new generations. Reruns still draw millions, memes keep the characters alive online, and streaming platforms introduce the series to viewers who weren't even born when it aired. Its influence can be seen in countless modern shows centered on unconventional families and bold female characters. Without Blanche, Dorothy, Rose, and Sophia, there might never have been a Sex and the City, a Grace and Frankie, or a Broad City. That's why the legacy of The Golden Girls is too big to bury. It isn't just a sitcom frozen in the 1980s. It's a cultural landmark that continues to spark debate, inspire writers, and comfort viewers decades after the cameras stopped rolling. In the end, the show's greatest rebellion wasn't the sharp jokes or the censored footage. It was the audacity to say that women's lives don't end at 40, that laughter, love, and friendship can carry us through every chapter of life. And that truth, daring and timeless, is something no network executive, no censor, and no era can ever silence.